I'd like to now invite Antonio Quispe to present on reactive case detection with targeted mass drug administration, interrupting malaria transmission, and achieving elimination beyond intervention areas in northwestern Peru. So just watch the time here.
That's how this works.
I need the green arrow to start, the red arrow to go back, and the lower star for the pointer. Yep, the red should go back. Yep.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm thrilled to be here and honored to represent the people from the north coast of Peru. We're going to tell the story behind this intervention, which is a kind of a marvelous effort from the people in the area to try to attempt malaria elimination before many of this conversation was started in Peru. So why reactive case detection with target mass drug administration? Actually, we were discussing this with Alan before he passed away, and his advice was, okay, this sounds like a good idea. It may happen that it's true, that passively detected cases may work as a good signal to track the human case, but he was really concerned about how we're going to use massive drug administration. So when we're discussing this, we were actually trying to figure out what may be the best way to combine both. Before that conversation, in the North Coast, those people were already talking about this. And the way they think about it is that every time we take a passive case in a health facility, they were trying to move forward to locate the patient and the households, but go beyond that. Go straight to the way they work and where they study. And they actually implement at that level that kind of intervention. So when they try to reach more people, they go beyond the household, don't within a radius, but most of it on a social interrelationship with the co-workers and where they're studying. So the application, it occurs in different parts of the world with different definitions. So what are the commonalities? First of all, implied screening around index cases. Now, the key difference is what diagnostic tools are you going to use. So you microscopy, rapid diagnostic test, or you do PCR, or you also include a follow-up component. And if you include a follow-up component, you of course are going to use GIS location to try to follow the patient to the places. And even though some of those exercises have been included within the national guidelines. So the way you're going to implement this in the field, it requires to do something about it. So some kind of marvelous way, you're going to identify those cases. Now the question is, what else are you going to do? So we have different options, but this one in particular is supposed to be very cost effective. And the idea behind it is, of course, try to reach the largest fraction of the, the largest fraction of the human malaria reservoir, particularly asymptomatic cases. So how many of those people are you actually going to reach if you're only looking for the household, or you're looking within a radius, or you're looking for those people where they work or where they study? So in this particular case, we went in that direction. So again, there is many definitions, many ways to do this, but most of those are triggered by incident cases and exclude infant, pregnant women, and chronic comorbidities. In the case of areas where the vivax is the most predominant form of malaria, you're of course going to be concerned about G6PD deficiency and how you're going to test that if you have the capacities to do so. And also you need to include a component for adverse event surveillance. And if you can do that and include that within the national guidelines, that's a different matter. But again, it's also based on what you're targeting here. And here is the key difference. Some areas, like this one in particular, we're going to present, is only driven by vivax transmission with a long time history of using primaquine. So the people from Peru were not concerned at all about G6 deficiency. And the previous trial that were carried on inside, they don't prove that it proved that it exists, but knowing the magnitude that came out with the adverse events. So if you have that, and you can implement this kind of intervention, this is the way we did it. First, we need to convince everybody that it's feasible. So these guys from Tumbes, they did a marvelous job. They fight against the odds and tried to convince the people from the Ministry of Health, but they didn't bite it. The ones who were more concerned were the Ecuadorian. So in this particular area, you're going to see that there is the Ecuadorian border, this is the Pacific Ocean, and down in the south is the region of Piura, which is at 8 times larger than Tumbes. But the key factor here is that all of the Pacific coast is communicated by the Pan American Highway. So there is one main road where you can go from the north to the south, even from the Colombia up to Chile. So if you can imagine that this is a border, the commerce in this particular area is very, very intense. So most of the complaints come from the Ecuadorians saying that we're exporting malaria to them, and it's the same case from the Peruvians. We're importing the cases from Ecuador. So in that kind of relationship, some collaboration come up. And the Ecuadorian government decided to donate 20,000 full treatment for Vivax malaria we can implement that intervention. So what happened here is that we started with 2 districts, 2 of the highest endemic districts, particularly this one here, which is in the border, that's Aguas Verdes, and here is Corrales. So as you may notice, those are in the communication from the Pan American Highway. So we started there, and we dropped down malaria by half in 1 year. So the malaria was increasing in the rest of the districts, so the Ministry of Health, because of that, approved it to scale up. So we did it for the following 4 years, and everything changed dramatically. What we used was chloroquine and primicron standard doses, and we included a component for adverse events available within the hospitals only to figure out a way if we can capture any kind of adverse event. So this is what happened. Malaria dropped down. But the idea here is that if you notice, at one point, the controls, which is the 11 districts that were not intervening the first year, was increasing, and the very next year, everything started falling down. So the numbers in terms of annual parasite incidence, it goes from 15 in intervened areas to 6 per 1,000 cases, then to below 1 after the 3rd year. In the case of the control, you will have that it was an increase in the 2nd year, and because we scaled in the 3rd year, everything started falling down. But this is based on microscopy, okay? We were really concerned about residual malaria. So what are the tools we have available? Absolutely none. So what happens after, I'm going to comment about it, but take that in mind. So in this particular exercise, what we want to do is to assess what was the effect of that intervention beyond the areas of the intervention itself. So this is Tumbes. This is where we start the intervention, and this is the largest area of Piura. But this road here, it goes from north to south and goes straight to Lima, the capital of Peru. So we want to assess the effect in terms of a most sensitive way to do it. We did it with weekly parasite incidence. So if you notice in the table below, is the proximity what we're trying to assess. How proximal, how is the distance from one surveillance unit from Piura to the sites of where the intervention were implemented in Tumbes. So if you notice, there is some kind of correlation. It's statistically significant, but at the end of the day, you will see that as closer to the area of the pilot site intervention, you will reduce faster the counts of malaria. So this is the timing when we do the scale-up. So have you noticed in several different presentations, that happens very often. If you're going to intervene in an area, there is an effect in the nearby area, but we didn't expect that it was that intense. And the only reason we can imagine that happened is because it was the communication, intense commerce that drive people to travel to Ecuador, traffic with oil or whatever they need to traffic with, and come back to their households. So at the moment we interrupt the transmission of malaria and the particular site when the commerce were occurring on, then something might happen. And the effect of that intervention went beyond that area of the intervention. So the take-home message here is that as soon as you understand how the dynamics of transmission occur in the sites where you study, maybe you can go we have major effects, major collateral effects to the one you were expecting from the beginning. So we want to assess that. So the way we did it, of course, was due to some remote sensing data. We compiled 4-level models with different variables from socio-demographics, try to explore every economical variable we have, try to measure how intense was the traffic in the roads. We tried to compile about the levels of how much budget was invested in every site, and everything was not that variable to be measured by the model. So, of course, remote sensing data is the most variable you always want to have. And if you notice in the graphics here, in terms of variability, this one is huge. So you were expecting that temperature was one of the driving forces to explain the variability of malaria around the region, but for some reason that came out marginal in the model. So the most predominant was the distance from the site to the location of the pilot project sites, the normalized different vegetation index, precipitation, and soil moisture. So here is here's our conclusion from this exercise. Of course, this might be effective. Can we prove that really for the fact? I don't think so yet. We would love to have some molecular assays to test asymptomatic people right now and try to see how many residual malaria we may have in the area. But something happened in 2017. I don't know if you hear about it, but the El Niño Costero make a huge flooding in the area. So what may be the impact of that in the remaining population of mosquitoes, we don't know for sure. We believe that it had a major impact in the mosquito population, that residual malaria went away. Forest studies will be required to measure this, of course, but in the case of Peru, there is particular areas in the Amazon, because that's a river-based system, that makes sense there too. And that is something that we really want to explore in terms that in the case of a river-based system, you only can go below the river faster, and up to the river is a limitation. So how we can implement this reactive case target mass drug administration in that particular area that every single year remain as the largest foci of the human malaria reservoir, and measure what happens after. So that's the hypothesis we're going to test further. And like I mentioned before, this just happened early in 2017. So a lot of rain, a lot of flooding. What may be the impact of that much water in the remaining mosquitoes in the area? How that was shifted by the dengue outbreak we have so currently, which is huge by now. It's the largest historic dengue outbreak in the history of Peru. And this is in this particular area. So those people are not concerned about malaria anymore, thanks probably, or most likely, to the intervention that was carried on 4 years ago. So just to take credit for these guys, they did an amazing job. The Epidemiologists for Tumbes and Piura, led by Dr. Fernando Quintana, the people from the General Directorate Epidemiology, the Strategy of Control of Vector-borne Diseases from Peru, and thanks for myself for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and my NA's faculty to study my PhD at Hopkins. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Antonio. I think we have time for a couple of questions. If you have a question, please come to the microphones in the center aisle. And while we're waiting, maybe I can just ask a question about the community acceptance.
Yes. In this particular setting, it's a semi-urban area. So the health workers from the Ministry of Health, the epidemiologists, have a very good connection with the people. And particularly because there is some system beyond that. It's known that the vaso de leche, which is some kind of social system to provide milk to the mothers, that was based on that program too. So all the communication starts and ends with that, and they take advantage of that social organization of the people to communicate the program and try to engage as much people as one. So the ratio of people, of contact people that was treated by each index case, it was 8. So every index case we treat 8 contacts. And that was only between the household inhabitants and including the co-workers and some of the people from the schools.
Great. Okay, I'll ask one other question. With the Zika and the dengue situation in the last few years, what has been the impact on the malaria control program?
That's a good question. So in a sense, they just disappeared. At the moment that Zika and dengue became like a major problem in the North Coast, they stopped thinking about malaria at all. Even with the awareness of how many cases they may have from the Venezuelan importation. So Peru right now have a lot of Venezuelans taken away from his country and arriving to Peru and arriving in these particular areas. So it may happen that those imported cases may start an outbreak and we are not aware yet. How many of the symptomatic people, the symptomatic carrier, just reactivate the malaria with a fever case and we are totally neglected about it.
Okay, we have time for one question.
Thank you. Antonio, excellent presentation. Just quickly, can you just comment how much migration is from the Amazon in Peru? You just mentioned now the Venezuelan. I think that everybody's really alarmed with the disaster going on right now. Can you comment on within Peru, how is the migration between the Amazon to the northern part of Peru? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question, but in terms of migration from Loreto, which is kind of the major foci of malaria currently, to the North Coast specifically, there is no way to go there. There is one single way, but it's very rarely used, and most of the people need to travel to Lima by plane and taking a plane to go to Piura. So that's a major barrier. So in terms of trying to assess this, we have at least 5 imported cases documented from Iquitos into Piura, but no more than that, and that just